Hey guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me for another one of my videos today. So today's episode is a podcast episode from my podcast, Spiritual Queen's Badass Podcast, which is available on Acast, iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere that distributes podcasts. So today's video interview is with the one and only Young Pueblo, and I have been a fan of Young's work for absolutely forever. So that's his pen name, and his real name is Diego. And it was such a pleasure to be able to sit down with Diego and actually talk to him and find out all about him. So Diego is a meditator, a writer, and a poet. And you've probably seen his words over on Instagram or his quotes shared around. So after reading his first book and falling in love, I decided that it was time to bring him on the podcast to celebrate his new book, Clarity and Connection. So in this interview, we talk all things self-love, we talk about connection, clarity, healing, and it's a really beautiful, deep conversation. So I think you guys are absolutely going to love it. So I really hope you enjoy this interview with Diego and I. And of course, more information about the podcast as well if you'd like to listen to more episodes. And of course, I have a whole playlist here over on YouTube with all my celebrity guest video interviews as well for you to watch anytime you like. So please enjoy this interview. It was an absolute honor and pleasure being able to spend time with the wonderful Diego. It was such an enriching conversation, and I hope you take away lots of goodness from it too. So thank you so much guys for watching. I appreciate all your views and likes. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here, because I would love to see you again soon. Don't forget to leave me a comment in the comments box down below with your thoughts on this interview, because I would love to hear your thoughts and I reply to them all. Don't forget you can also join my free Law of Attraction support group over on Facebook, where you can join myself and other like-minded souls, where we talk all things Law of Attraction and spirituality. I hope you have a great week, whatever you're up to, and I'll see you all in my next video, which will be next week. Lots of love, guys. So thank you so much guys for joining me for another one of my Spiritual Queen's Badass Podcast episodes. I am so excited to have the wonderful Young Pueblo with us today, who's also known as Diego Perez. So Diego is a meditator, writer, and speaker who is wildly known on Instagram and various social media networks through his pen name, Young Pueblo. Online, he has an audience of over 1 million people that he reaches through his written works that focus on the reality of self-healing, the movement from self-love to unconditional love, and the wisdom that comes when we truly work on knowing ourselves. His first book, Inward, quickly became a bestseller, and his second book, Clarity and Connection, is also out now. So welcome to the show, Diego.
Thank you so much, Emma. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Honestly, this is a dream for me. I've followed your work on your Instagram for a couple of years now. So to be able to sit with you and have this time is wonderful. And I actually bought your first book, Inward, beginning of this year. I was like, who is this Young Pueblo guy? Like, we hear about him. I see all his quotes. And I was like, look, let's read this book. And it honestly, I loved it. Loved every page. So I'm really excited for Clarity and Connection as well. So my first question that I love to ask everybody on the podcast when they come on is, when did you spiritually awaken? What's your story?
So my real spiritual awakening was more of an awakening of self-awareness. Like, it was in the summer of 2011. I hit this horrible rock bottom where I almost lost my life. I can like smile about it and think about it a little more positively now, but it was a terribly difficult time where I had developed so many bad habits that were all caused by me running away from my emotions. And it got to the point where I was using a lot of drugs, always partying, always trying to keep myself externalized so that I wouldn't have to feel or pay attention to any of the tumultuousness that was happening inside of me. But that led to this big crash where I used a bunch of drugs one night, and I felt like I was having a heart attack, like I was dying. But I was able to, luckily the worst didn't happen. And I was able to pick myself up from there. And I asked myself, how did I get to this point? And the answer was, I got to this terrible point by lying to myself. So to pull myself out of it, that's where I started practicing radical honesty and just like trying to be with myself with whatever may arise. May I just, sit with it, even if it's really uncomfortable, and may I not use it as a means of escape. And that's really what started the whole process.
I love what you say there in terms of like, you realize like you were lying to yourself, because when you said that, I was like, Oh, I definitely feel I can relate to that as well. My spiritual awakening, of whether it's like jobs, relationships, or
Hmm.
whatever circumstance we're in, like you do find, especially with like kind of awakenings or awareness awakenings, whether you call it a spiritual awakening or not, people do kind of wake up and they're like, oh, how have I been lying to myself? What have I not been doing that's not serving me? So, it's incredible from that place where you said, you felt like you were dying and you nearly did die, to now being here, what, 10 years on with all your wonderful work. It definitely seems like a very beneficial awakening that happened for you.
Yeah, no, it definitely pointed me in the right direction because I just didn't, I was so miserable. And what I was really lying to myself about was, I couldn't admit to myself how depressed I had felt. I felt so much sadness, so much anxiety. And, coming to terms with that just opened me up to like, having much more calmness during difficult situations and just like all this new wisdom that you get when you really start going inward.
Definitely, which is perfect title for the book, going inwards to find those answers, isn't it? So nowadays, you're a writer, you write books, you
Hmm.
write poetry, and all your amazing inspiration online as well. So how did we get from 10 years ago to now with your writing?
Oh, that's a good question. So I I never planned to be a writer. Like I got to be 100% honest with you. I that was not in the works. But it wasn't until after I had that sort of realization and sort of walk into self-awareness, a year later, I started meditating Vipassana. And when I started, I felt like little trickles of creativity start coming out. And I remember like after the first 10 day course I did, I wrote a poem. And then I did a few more courses. And it was after that when it hit me that I should spend some time writing, that I felt like real healing was happening. And this was even before the era of like self-love and, all these like amazing people who are telling their stories. Like it felt like a new realm. Um, so I wanted to just share that healing was even possible. And I knew that, I had so much healing left to go. I don't know everything. I'm not enlightened or anything like that, but I wanted to, start sharing part of my journey, even though I was in the midst of my journey.
Mm, exactly. And like you say, like with poetry as well, it's very different from like a self-help book where you're
Right.
kind of like putting those tips and tools out there. You're like, here's how you get from A to B. With
Yeah,
your
yeah.
work, it's very much like this is raw, this is here, this is now. And I think that's why I found your book so refreshing, because it was actually like you can connect to it on a whole different level. Instead of saying, right, here's how you fix the problem, it's like, here's how we feel the problem first, and you can really connect to like every word that you're saying. So that's why I think it's been so popular, because it really can, appeal to anybody at any stage in their life or any stage in their awakening for different reasons. So where does your inspiration come from, do you think, to write all this beautiful poetry?
That's a good question. I think it's a pretty like interesting process. Sometimes it's very on the spot. Like I'll just have pieces kind of just appear in my mind and I'll write them down. And other times it's just through very light self-analysis. I'll ask myself, what have I been learning lately? What patterns have I seen coming up repeatedly? Like what am I particularly working on letting go right now? And other times it's conversations between me and my wife where we will like share that self-examination together. And she'll tell me what she's working on, I tell her what I'm working on, and we start kind of like noticing the patterns that are just across all of human beings. Like we think we're very different, and it's true, we're very unique, but we're incredibly similar at the same time. The same way that you deal with anxiety, I deal with anxiety, you deal with sadness, I deal with sadness. And these are common emotions that we share, and the mind will react to them in a very similar way. So I try to pull out the general aspects of what it is to be a human being from just like everyday life.
I think that's what makes it so relatable, like you say, because it is everyday life of everybody feels these emotions. Everybody goes through these challenging and tough times in their life. Especially with inward, it like takes you along that journey of like the different sections of the different parts of your kind of healing and journey. So again, it's just relatable to so many people of like, you pick up the book and by the end you're like, although there wasn't really, you know, like do this, meditate, or do this, it's like actually those words have been healing in itself. And you know, it's beautiful to hear that, you know, you reflect with your wife on that, and that's what goes into the work. So is it hard, because obviously if you've got very raw emotions, like does that work make it in the book, or are you someone who has like a secret poetry collection just for yourself?
That's a good question. I do have some secret pieces that I write that I don't really release, because I try to write a lot about like I try to write from the perspective of someone who has never meditated before. And it's interesting because I spend a lot of time meditating. You know, I meditate 2 hours a day, and I've been doing that for I think more than 5 years now. So there are things that I'm trying to understand in regards to like the fundamentals of reality, or like how this whole existence really works, that I keep to myself, because I want to put the work that I put out there in the public. I want to make it incredibly accessible. That's why I combine everything with minimalism, and that's why, like what you were saying, you know, I try to keep um, my voice as a writer as in the form of an explorer and not a teacher, right? Like I'm not a teacher. I'm somebody who's just on the journey, just like everybody else. So instead of telling you like, this is how you let go, this is how you do X, Y, and Z, it's like, no, it's like, well, letting go is pretty personal and it's pretty individualized. So depending on your conditioning and what's happened to you in your life and how much trauma you may have, the technique that works for you is going to be very different than the technique that works for me. So understanding that is, I think it's really important.
Definitely, definitely. And like no one shoe fits all, of like everybody's
No.
experiences are different, like you say. So let's talk about your new book then, Clarity and Connection. So what does clarity and connection mean to you?
So clarity and connection is kind of like the next step after inward. It's really like I think like the next, like the sibling to inward, the sequel. And my thought behind it was, when you go inward, you really start getting to know yourself, and you start this like unbinding process, the process of letting go, the process of healing. And what you get after that, you know, even though you may not be fully healed, there's a big transformation that's happened.
Mm.
And when you step out from that inner journey, right, you have a new sense of clarity. You can see the world, you can see yourself much more clearly. Your interactions have a deeper meaning, and it shifts into connection, because all of the connections that you may have, you know, whether it's with friends, with family members, or with like an intimate relationship, like a partnership, they they have this new window that opens up that makes them much more deeper. And that's once that introspective work, all of their personal connections just, you know, they get deeper, they get much more rich, they're much more nourished, and you're able to just build something much greater between two people.
I love that. I love how you describe that. And like you say, going through that transformation journey, going inwards, doing that inner work allows you, like you say, the inner then reflects the outer. So you're able to have those closer relationships and
Exactly.
have that clarity in all connections, whether it's to yourself, to the universe, to others. So I love that it is that kind of sister book, the next step as such. So what can we expect inside the book? Can you give us any sneak peeks?
Yeah, I think inside the book, it's going to be like, it's going to flow between, you know, personal transformation work, like individualized pieces that are kind of talking about, you know, how that shift happens between who you were in the past and who you are now. And then there are chapters. There's one chapter that I particularly love. It's called The Love Between Us, where I go deep into relationships, and I really try to tease out, you know, like, what does a relationship that did not work out, like, what does that feel like? What does that look like? And then what does a relationship look like when two people realize that, okay, we both have a lot of work to do with ourselves as individuals, and how does our healing then precipitate a whole new relationship between us, so that we can love each other better, so that we can support each other better, and so that we can just you know, through our inner work, be able to just have a much deeper relationship. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And that leads me on perfectly to our next question. So, your work focuses on unconditional love and moving to that space. So, how can we move from self love to unconditional love? What would be your top tips?
So moving from self-love to unconditional love, I think it's so important to get your foundation right. I think you need to be able to have that active form of self-love where you're constantly nourishing yourself. You're constantly not you want to set yourself up in a way where you do have boundaries, where okay, I'm going to be in service of others, but at the same time, I'm going to make sure to be in service to myself. And not just the type of self-love that feeds you on the like pleasant level, right? Like not you're not just trying to give yourself pleasantness, you're
Mm,
trying to use the energy of self-love to get to know yourself better, because real self-love is about personal transformation, and it's about, using that energy to evolve into a better version of yourself. But what I love about that connection between self-love and unconditional love is that self-love really just opens the door to unconditional love to all beings, because the more that you understand yourself and you understand your own mind and you understand your patterns and your inner workings, that helps you develop a greater sense of compassion for other people. So that when you, after, well, not after, but during your journey, you start realizing that when you come across difficult people or people who are a bit harsh, you start seeing, oh, right, these are these patterns that I recognized in myself in the past. Or, I may not know what type of trauma this other person has experienced. So let me be gentle with them. And at the same time, may I, protect myself how I need to. But it just gives you a new sense of compassion that without self love, it wouldn't really be possible. You need that internal exploration of yourself to be able to have a better understanding of other people.
absolutely. And I love what you said there about compassion, because I think it's so important to, like you say, once you've mastered that love for self, to then
Hmm.
say, it's not personal what someone is doing or how they're acting. It's not always personal. And although it's like having those loving boundaries and, that unconditional love for self to be like, no, if it's not right, or if someone's not treating you right, it's also then having that unconditional love where you're looking past that and you're like, I can still love you, no matter, like I can love you from afar, I can love you
Right,
close,
right.
whatever feels good. And I think, it is that kind of evolution, like you say, where you go from that journey of self-love to, right, how can I reflect this into the outer world now? So I loved everything that you said with that.
There's
So
one that, can I add one more little
yeah, cool,
thing?
go for it.
There's one thing that always like comes to mind, right? If there was more self-love in the world, like self-love is literally like the missing piece. And not just like peace as in puzzle piece, but peace as in Peace. Like if more and more people around the world were able to love themselves a little better, treat themselves a little better, then that's going to make them much less likely to harm me and others, So self-love is really just, it's so key. And it's as we move into the future, it's going to be seen as a foundational piece to global peace.
Definitely 100% agree with that. And I just think, what a different world we would live in if we were taught that in school, or, if we were taught this from a young age. I know
Yeah.
that, it was very seen as egotistical to love yourself or to have that relationship with self. And then when I spiritually awakened, I was like, whoa, this has been wrong the whole time, right?
Right, totally. And it's not egotistical at all. I mean, how can I serve you if I can't serve myself? Like I'm, if I can't be anything to myself, I'm not going to be anything to you.
Exactly. Love those words. So, for anybody listening who is like, this sounds great, I want to do this, everything you're saying is resonating with me, but how do we self heal? How do we get to that place? What are your top tips for self healing?
It's really, I mean, I guess it's two main tips. It's one is and probably the most important one is find your tool. And this is so key. We live in a globalized world where there are so many different introspective methods that have been developed through different cultures, and they're much more widely accessible than they were before. Like we can go further in terms of accessibility, but you can, ranging from something as simple as journaling or one-on-one therapy or different forms of meditation, and then so many other types of techniques, things that I might not even be aware of, but that there's literally something out there for you. So understanding that you need to find something that meets your personal sweet spot, something that is challenging for you, but not overwhelming, right? Something that will help you become stronger and wiser, but won't bring up too many things at once that you feel overwhelmed and you don't want to continue the process. So finding that personal sweet spot, finding that tool or technique or method that really connects with your intuition. Once you have it, once you've figured out what the thing is for you, then give it your time, consistency, trying again and again and going through it, even though it gets difficult. I think that just makes a world of a difference. Self-healing is really best done through some sort of method that fits you.
Definitely. And, I think I'm sure you can speak from your own experiences as well. But for me, like, I kind of started off with self-love and going down that kind of journey. And then, it got deeper and deeper over time as, more things came up. And, I think being gentle with it, like you say, is really important because, like you say, you don't want to overwhelm yourself or trigger yourself too much. And sometimes, it is working in a safe space for somebody to unpack that, go through that. Other times, like you say, meditation or EFT tapping or anything, any of these great tools that are out there can bring that self-love, bring that self-soothe, as you say. And I think again, it's remembering that healing is not linear. And I'm sure you're going to be like, yes to this. Like, I thought, I'm healed, it's all good, everything's great. And then like 6 months later, like, oh no, it's back, I haven't healed it.
No, and it's literally like an onion. Like there are layers upon layers upon layers, and you'll find like, oh, there's fear again, and there it is. But literally, we don't realize how many times we've reacted in our lives. We've reacted so many times that, like, each time you react, it leaves an imprint on the mind, and it settles in the subconscious, and that will affect the way that you react in future situations. Mm-hmm. So it takes time to unbind all these knots that have been built over time. And we have to be patient, but we have to keep trying. Yeah.
Exactly. Patience is key, and awareness as well. Like, even having the awareness of, oh, that's my pattern, or, oh, that's my fear. Like, that's powerful in itself to just have that awareness to then say, right, how can I do differently next time? How can I be more self-loving to myself or self-loving to others next time? Even just witnessing is a powerful self-healing as well, isn't it?
Totally. I mean, and it's funny because the more I think about it, through observation, that's how you let go. When you can fully accept what you're observing, then the unbinding happens naturally.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So my last question to you today then, Diego, is what is one piece of life advice that you would like to leave my listeners with today?
I think, well, one of the best pieces of advice that I got, it's so simple, but it helped me so much when I was doing my first 10-day Vipassana course. Like, it was incredibly challenging. And, it's not for everybody, but it's for a lot of people. If it's something you want to try, you should check it out. But somebody who had done the course before and was doing it again, I asked him if he had any advice, and he was like, be strong, you're like, you can do it. And his little bit of advice, I mean, that helped me so much because there were so many times where I wanted to give up, but when I kept going, I was able to persevere after the 10 days, and it ended up giving me the immensely transformed my life. So I don't think we often realize like how strong we are, and we can, get through those tough moments. We just have to, be calm and sail through the storm.
Mm-hmm. The only way is through, and committing to yourself like you did there, by following through that practice, by following through and giving yourself that opportunity, you see those results with perseverance. Amazing. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So Clarity and Connection is out now. So where can my lovely listeners get your book if they would love to know more about this book?
You can get it anywhere books are sold. So you can get it through, I think it's called Waterstones, and Amazon UK, or just literally anywhere books are sold, or Book Depository. And I hope it serves you well.
Well, I can't wait to read it. I've pre-ordered my copy. I'm going to add it to my Inward collection. I'm so excited to receive it.
Thanks so much.
But where can my lovely listeners find more about your work, Diego, if they want to find more of you online? Because you've got an awesome Instagram, so tell everybody all about your work.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the main places that I hang out and share new material is on Instagram. And you can check out, it's YUNG_PUEBLO. And then in all the other places like Twitter and Facebook, it's Young Pueblo, spelled the same way like I just spelled, but without the underscore. And my newest place that I have been doing a lot of new writing is on Substack. and it's youngpueblo.substack.com. And it's been great, just writing longer pieces and letting the creativity flow there.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Diego, for coming on the show today. It's honestly been an absolute pleasure speaking with you and finding more about clarity and connection. I'm so excited to see more of your work and see what comes your way. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Emma. This has been such a joy. Thank you so much.